Okay, guys, here we go. Let's start out our DLD on the directory phase. This will be for May 7th. I guess you people look like you're far enough away that I'm safe. So there we go. And as you can tell, I'm pretty ready for summer to be here. But I need to be able to see you. So there we go. I'll go back to my regular glasses. Okay, so we're going to finish up talking about the French Revolution today. We've been talking about the three phases. We talked about the moderate phase. We talked about the radical phase, which is really, really scary. And today we're going to finish up talking about the directory phase. This is from about 1795 to 1799. And what you need to think about is a pendulum going back and forth and back and forth. That's why in the materials in the module, you'll see a picture of a metronome. It's like things are swinging back and forth and back and forth. We've gone from really, really radical. We went from moderate to radical, and now we're going to swing back to more conservative, okay, in the directory phase. We're kind of scared of this whole reign of terror thing and the impact that it's having on our economy and the disruptions that it's bringing about in our society. So we want to change it back. And the people who are responsible for this, they take control through the elections and the National Convention. They are called Girondins, Girondins, and they are more conservative. They tend to be middle class. They tend to be professionals. We don't have the radical intellectuals. We don't have the sans-culottes. And what they do, because this is what you do in France during this time period, you write a new constitution. This would be their third constitution in about 6 years. Okay? And they create a two-house legislature, but the executive branch is a five-man board called a directory. So notice what's happening here. We've gone from a king to a constitutional monarchy, to a republic, to a committee of public safety, to a yet smaller, still five-man directory. France is still at war. Okay, France is still at war with Britain. They're still at war with Austria. They've settled up with Spain. They've settled up with the Netherlands. They've settled up with Prussia, but they're still at war. They have lots of problems of corruption in their government, lots of bribery. The issues of food shortages and inflation are still going on, and people want change. What they want more than anything else is just plain stability. They're tired of all the disruptions. They want things to calm down, okay? There are people who actually have fled France during the radical phase, especially the aristocracy, fled France during the radical phase, and now they are starting to come back. They are called émigrés. And the émigrés, actually, many of them actually say, we need to turn the clock all the way back to the point where we have a constitutional monarchy. Bring back the king. And not surprisingly, many of them are staunch Catholics. So they oppose the efforts that the radicals have made towards eliminating the Christian church as a force within France. In 1797, there is yet another election, and in this election, the party that supports the constitutional monarchy actually takes control of they're going to take control of the National Convention. Now, about the same time that this is happening, remember we said France is at war. France is at war with Britain. France is at war with Austria still. And what happens is a young military officer, he's an artillery captain. He's in charge of artillery, so cannons, okay? His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. Technically, he's not even French. He comes from the island of Corsica, which in about 1765, France took control of. His father actually fought against the French when they took control of Corsica. But in 1793, he wins a victory at a place called Toulon. That's port city in southern France. The British have taken control of it. He drives the British out. Automatically, he's a military hero. Everybody loves Napoleon. Then he goes on and he defeats the Austrians in several battles. So he's helping turn the tide in these wars. He attacks Egypt. Why Egypt? Because the British control it and it's their halfway point. Since the British no longer have the American colonies, their richest colony is India, and they want to control the means to get over there. Well, if you control Egypt, you force them to go all the way around. You force them to go all the way around Africa. Now, Napoleon suffers a terrible defeat in Egypt. He barely escapes without being captured, but along the way, he sees the pyramids. He starts sending back things from Egypt. Remember the Rosetta Stone? Remember Jean Champollion that we talked about in first semester? Well, all of a sudden, the science that we call Egyptology is now beginning to emerge. In 1799, Napoleon and some others, Napoleon's really popular now, Napoleon and some others overthrow the Directory, that 5-man board that's running things, and they create a 3-man board called the Consulate. So again, we're getting smaller and smaller. Guess who is declared to be, who's on that board? Napoleon is, and then in 1802, he is declared to be first consul, so he's the most important one, and in 1802, he's declared consul for life. Who does this sound like that we talked about in the first semester? Oh, I don't know. How about Julius Caesar? Remember, he had himself declared dictator for life. And in 1804, what happens is he has himself declared emperor. Now, how is this happening? Along the way, every time Napoleon does one of these things that look really outrageous to us, he has an election. It's a kind of election called a plebiscite. A plebiscite is just a one issue election. And it's basically, hey, do you approve of Napoleon or do you not approve Napoleon? Now, what's happened is Napoleon has brought stability. Napoleon has restored pride. And so every time he holds one of these plebiscites, overwhelmingly people say, yay, we want Napoleon. So in 1804, he has himself crowned emperor. And what happens is the Pope comes to crown him. And when the Pope comes to crown him, what happens is Napoleon takes the crown from the Pope and puts it on his head himself, symbolically showing, Pope, you don't have authority over me. Okay? So we have moved from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy to a republic to an oligarchy, and now we're back to essentially a monarchy slash dictatorship. Okay? So that's the situation when we get to 1804. Hildy, stop that. Now, sorry about that. Now, why is the French Revolution so important? Well, for one thing, what's happened is it's a total change in the way things have been done in France. The old social order is gone with the 3 estates. Boom, out. And everyone has been granted equality before the law. And this is going to kind of scare a number of the monarchs who are around Europe, in Germany and in Spain and in Russia, places like that. France develops a new sense of pride in their country. We call this nationalism. No longer do they identify themselves as, oh, I'm from Burgundy, I'm from Normandy, I'm from Paris, I'm from France now, and by God, I'm proud of it. Okay? They have instituted along the way a state system of education, so the state is running schools. They've eliminated a lot of the corruption in government, and you rise in government not by birth, not who you're related to, but based on your merit. What kind of job do you do? If you do a good job, you're going to advance in the government. The downside of this, especially during the radical phase, we're going to see a lot of anti-Christianity. I talked to you about the calendar yesterday. They also uh, went to churches and they would cover up the name of the church. So if you went to St. Jude's Church, they would cover that up and it wouldn't be called a church, it was called a temple of reason. They also changed any street names that were related to Christianity. So if you had Rue de St. James, they changed that street name completely. They tried to eliminate the influence of Christianity entirely in France. And what happens is, as the Girondins take control, the church has a greater influence again within France. If we look at this compared to the American Revolution, in both cases we see a republic established. But in the case of France, they're going to revert back to a single man rule. Now, in the future, France will return to a republic. I think the big reason for this is the Enlightenment influences. On the one hand, you have Locke and you have Reed and you have Hutcheson in the Americans. With the French Revolution, the primary one is Rousseau, who says the most important thing is the general will, and the government is there to impose the general will on you, whether you agree with it or not. Motivating factors are different. Although they both want to have popular sovereignty, big difference for the French Revolution is a lot of what sparks it is economic conditions. In the American Revolution, the colonies are doing well. They're well off. Everybody's well fed. Okay? Treatment of religion is a big difference. The Americans want respect for religion. The reign of terror is a big difference between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. We see nothing like that. And in fact, the reign of terror ends up in more people being executed than were killed in the Revolutionary War, by about a factor, by more than twice as many. There's about 6,000 casualties, 6,800 casualties in the American Revolution that resulted in deaths. 17,000 people get executed in the French Revolution. And going forward, the French Revolution is going to have a big impact on other revolutions that are going to come later, including the Russian Revolution in 1917, the Vietnam War, the Chinese Revolution, and a nasty dude named Pol Pot who takes control of Cambodia in the 1970s and actually ends up killing about 1 million people. And he models his revolution on the French Revolution. And you can understand how that works and why. It's all about the general will. Okay? So we're all done. This is our last one for this week. Next week is our last week of classes. So we're getting near the end. Some of you still need to turn in your homework. You need to get that done between now and the end of next week because there's going to be a drop dead date not too long after that. So get it in. I can accept it, I can grade it, I can enter it, I can give you credit, but pretty soon I won't be able to. So you know who you are. Get it into me. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you next week.